Christian McCaffrey is listed day-to-day with a shoulder injury that he suffered at the end of their most recent game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and this is your #1 source for learning about the unique medical side of the world of sports. In this video, we're going to take a look at what could have happened here with Panthers running back Christian McCaffrey, talking about the possible mechanisms and injuries he could be dealing with here. As always, be sure to go subscribe if you want to stay up to date with my future videos, and go follow my Twitter account for more real-time updates. And let's get started. This was the play where McCaffrey got hurt here. We can see him catch the ball, and as he's running out towards the sideline, he basically falls and looks like he lands on his right shoulder here. Unfortunately, we didn't get any other views of this injury here, but just based on his momentum that carries him forward here, we can see as that right arm's coming down, looks like he basically lands on that right shoulder. We can see him on the sideline here, kind of moving that right arm and right shoulder around, clearly in a little bit of discomfort. Based on how he landed, the most common injury that we'd see from something like this is going to be an AC joint sprain or a shoulder separation. We'll run through some other things here on the differential with our anatomy, but basically what we're looking at here is kind of the anatomy of a right shoulder. We've got, of course, the sternum here, the breastbone. We've got the clavicle, which is the collarbone, coming across, of course, the humerus, the arm bone, and then we have our scapula here on the back with our various rotator cuff muscles shown here as well. The AC joint stands for the acromioclavicular joint, and it's the joint between the acromion and the clavicle. Specifically, it's gonna be this joint right here. You can kind of feel it on yourself, this kind of bump on the top of your shoulder. But there are actually other shoulder joints that we have to think of as being injured in this situation, one of which is gonna be the SC joint, or the sternoclavicular joint. That's the one that sits over here between the collarbone or the clavicle and the sternum. This is the joint that Tyreek Hill injured last year, where you might have remembered he had to go to the hospital and was a pretty serious injury. Similar types of mechanisms that we can see causing these two joints to be injured, but much more common to have an AC joint injury. But then, of course, anytime we hear about a shoulder injury, we have to make sure we keep the glenohumeral joint and the structures on our differential as well. We grade AC joint injuries based on something called the Rockwood classification, and we have everything from a type 1, which is the most mild, up to a type 6, which is the most severe. The classification is based entirely on which ligaments around the AC joint are injured and how severely they're damaged. A type 1 is gonna be the most mild form of an AC sprain, and that's when there's basically just some stretching to the acromioclavicular ligament, the ligament that runs between the acromion, which is this bone on the scapula, over to the clavicle. These types of injuries will have normal x-rays. There's just some stretching and damage to this AC ligament. A type 2 injury is gonna be when this AC ligament is actually completely torn. Again, we still might not see any big changes on x-ray. We might see a little bit of widening there in the AC joint, but type 2, actual tearing as opposed to just some stretching and micro level tearing of this AC ligament. Type 1 and type 2s are always managed conservatively, meaning they don't require surgery. There's initially a period of immobilization with the arm put in a sling to kind of calm down the pain and the swelling, and then you gradually work on regaining pain-free range of motion of that affected side. Usually return to play criteria involve when someone has good pain-free range of motion of that arm and has symmetric strength and movement between the injured side and the unaffected side. In a type 3 AC injury, we start to bring in involvement of another set of ligaments, specifically the CC ligaments, or the coracoclavicular ligaments. The coracoid process is this bump that kind of comes off of the scapula here. Sometimes you can feel it on yourself kind of closer to your chest, but the ligaments that keep the clavicle attached to that are going to be the coracoclavicular ligaments. When the AC ligament's torn and those coracoclavicular ligaments are torn, that's when we get a type 3 injury. Type 3s are a little more controversial in terms of if they need surgery or don't need surgery, but when we get to a type 4, that's when we really do need surgery. In a type 4, you've got tearing of that AC ligament, the CC ligaments, and now the clavicle actually gets posteriorly displaced back into the trapezius muscle. So now you've got all kinds of things out of alignment, and you do require surgery. In type 5, you have even further rupture and displacement here, and then in a type 6, again, it's just more severe in terms of where that clavicle is going to be displaced, again, requiring surgery. If we look at a top-down view onto that AC joint, we can understand a little bit how these types of injuries happen with that mechanism. If you imagine here a force kind of coming in from the bottom here and landing directly axially in line with the clavicle, all that force gets directed into the shoulder and can cause disruption of that ligament. Now, we always have to keep a wide differential here, and that's why it's important to do our physical exam, look at the imaging, and do a good thorough assessment, because even though the mechanism is common for an AC sprain, we still got to worry about the glenohumeral joint and all the structures that surround it. There could certainly be a shoulder injury dealing with some of the rotator cuff muscles. We got to think about the way the labrum can be injured a little bit anytime somebody falls in a football-like sport. There were some early reports about possible rib injuries, so got to keep a wide differential still, but wanted to kind of walk you guys through at least this acromial clavicular AC sprain component of what could be going on with McCaffrey. I'm not in the business of making predictions of when somebody's going to return to play because there are so many factors here that, frankly, I think it's kind of irresponsible to try to make those predictions, but sometimes we can do injections of numbing medicine into that AC joint. If someone's got good range of motion, good mobility and strength, but they're just dealing with pain, you can put numbing medicine in there to try to get them through a game until that ligament can fully heal. One other thing, it is important to remember that technically the SC joint over here is part of the shoulder. So you would think that if he had an SC injury, they'd be calling it chest, just kind of anatomically where it's located. But when they say shoulder injury, the SC joint could still be part of the shoulder and something to keep in mind. Nonetheless, though, I think an AC sprain should still be pretty high on our differential, but we'll get some updates hopefully around Wednesday to see exactly how McCaffrey's doing and if we expect him to go later on this weekend. That's it for the video, though, everybody. Thank you as always for watching, and I hope you learned something. Let me know any questions or comments down below, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.